Let's talk about dating. So this is my script for what I want to say mostly. And the reason why I have it in my hands is because although I want to be a podcast host that can just have my show and have my episode, know what I want to say on the fly, the reality is it just is not like that for me. So every podcast episode, all the ones I've done so far also, have actually been 2 exercises. The first exercise was a writing exercise. And then the second exercise was the recording exercise. So this episode is no different. And I want to read this and then, of course, talk about it while I'm reading it, because I don't want to try to read every single word, because I do have some very specific things to say. I don't want to miss it. Because I'm not very good at podcasting at the moment, this is the way we're going to have to do it. And we're doing this not just having me record in a void because I wanted the video, because of course this is going on YouTube and it's going to be searchable and all that good stuff when things go on YouTube. So this is what we're going to have to do for in the meantime. I'm actually quite interested on why there are not more people doing this. Maybe for a good reason. They've all tested that this way of recording a podcast solo episode is not going to work very well. But you know what? We are here right now and this is the way it is. So episode 6, I think, here we go. So let's talk about dating. This is going to be a very intimate episode for me because dating is so tender and personal to me. And I know myself pretty well. So I know I'm going to have a vulnerability hangover after I publish this episode. But this episode is a testament that I want this podcast to be about real topics on work, realistic topics that people encounter. And I want to be true to that. So what better to talk about than to talk about my intersection of dating and work? So here goes. To talk about dating and work is to talk about me and dating. So let me share some context with you. Dating is one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. It may be the hardest thing. It is the hardest thing I've done in my life to date. I have cried buckets of tears beyond what I would hope anybody would ever have to go through. And I can't even, it's so hard for me to begin to even describe how emotional this journey has been for me. And I've had times where the emotional pain was so strong and cut me so deeply that I felt like I could feel it. It was harder than when I started the daily work journal company and only sold 1 journal every 2 weeks. That was really hard. It was harder than when I was job hunting, when I quit my tech career and was unemployed and making poverty level income for months. Dating was harder than when I had to concede a few months ago that my work life wasn't what I wanted it to be, and that I was making less money than I wanted to be making. And I had to go back and get a full-time job. I haven't mentioned this on the podcast yet, but I actually don't run Daily Work Journal full-time at the moment. So I do have a full-time job. I have a full-time job working remotely in a sales enablement role. It's not on my LinkedIn, so if you do want to go check that out, you're not going to find it. But if you do some really intense internet Googling, you will probably find it. So yes, dating is the hardest thing I've done in my life, and make no mistake, I am not proud of it. In fact, I'm quite ashamed. I'm quite ashamed of it. I'm ashamed that dating has been so hard for me, because in dating, I can see all the parts of myself that I don't love about myself. And I'm not proud of that. I can see the part of myself trying very hard to be optimistic, but feeling very drained. I can recognize that I'd attributed value, and still continue to, frankly, in myself in my dating success. And I am frustrated at myself too for doing that. Isn't it funny how work and dating, or just relationships in general, are the 2 realms that most resemble each other? Right? The analogy is for one, is so ripe to be shared with each other. So tell me you haven't heard somebody say, for example, recruiting is so much like dating, blah, blah, blah. It's a numbers game. It's like you're putting yourself out there, all these things. So of course, the two worlds being so similar, there's so many overlaps for each other. And I've always wanted to have an episode talking about this too. So this is also a perfect opportunity to share with you all that I want this to be one of the last times I will be saying this out loud on record, because I am determined that I no longer want to feel this way about dating. The way you speak about anything in this world is how to make it real. That is how the universe works, and that is what I believe. Therefore, I don't want to be saying this anymore. From now on, I want dating to feel like ease. I am not going to dread it, but I can say that this has been true up until this point in my life. I am so grateful for all my friends, because I know and they know, and then they know that I know. Hopefully they know that I know that, they have been such a critical part of all of my healing from all of the relationships I've had. Some of them are the same friends, some of them are new friends, some of them are old friends that I no longer keep in touch with. But everybody has been such a critical part of my healing journey, and it gets exhausting, I must imagine, for them to keep hearing about me talk about dating in this way. So I think it's a good thing that collectively, I'm not crying, I'm just scratching my nose bridge, that I don't see dating in this light. It benefits everybody, let's just say that. So friends, thank you all for up until this point, for being there for me. Also, you are all invited to my wedding. You know who you are. So now that we've covered all the context, let's talk about my most recent work reflection with regards to dating. The most recent chapter of my dating saga and subsequent work reflections is centered around my breakup with my most recent boyfriend. This happened a few months ago, and it was really heartbreaking. I'll just leave it at that. And now I can say that in a flat voice because it has been a while, but that heartbreak was heartbreaking. At my full-time job, in the immediate aftermath, I noticed that the waves of sadness that ebbed and flowed over me over the course of those following weeks were so strong that I was not as productive at work as I had been prior to the breakup. And I had to take multiple breaks in the day to give my heartbreak some space. There's just a lot to process and feel and even think about that I hardly had any more brain space and heart space left for work. So this should not, I don't know if this probably doesn't strike anybody as crazy or sort of like a poignant work reflection, but it actually really was for me, because I had forgotten how, well, my baseline of productivity is quite high. And then when I was in that heartbreak, it really showed me that of how low I felt and how it affected me at work. And this breakup was also how I learned that grieving for a romantic relationship will never have and be treated the same way in corporate America as grieving for a loved one, and specifically a death of a family member. But in so many ways, they're so similar. No company offers you bereavement leave for your breakup, right? Like, even when I say that out loud, when you break up with someone, you would just be laughed out of any corporate American office to propose that you take some time off for a breakup, because that's just not our culture and that's not what we do. But when you break up with someone, you grieve the death of that relationship and what could have been. And so in many ways, that death for some of us could feel really, really, it would hit you home. And also, everybody at work expects you to bounce back in a week or two, max, like 2 weeks max from a breakup. My manager was very gracious. He let me take off that day. He let me take it easy with work the very next day, because I had told him I had broken up with my boyfriend, but I felt like I didn't have the permission to bring it up again, that I needed some more time after that. And that was very understandable because also, again, in corporate America, it's just not acceptable for you to take any more time for something like this. But the truth is, it took me months to heal from that breakup. And of course, the days right after were much more heartfelt and stronger than, let's say, months later. But no doubt, it still took me months. And that was what was true for me. And so, yeah, so the point is, nobody at work could quite accommodate for you, I don't think, if you're somebody like who I was. And we have to adjust for that. As an aside, if you are a people manager, this is a great way to show up for your direct reports. So check in with them a week or two after their breakup. It will mean a lot to them. Please do this only if there is psychological safety between you two. And whether you check in with them or not is not going to impact their healing journey necessarily, but it will really help you build psychological safety with them. And that'll help in your relationship with them as their manager and them as your direct report. So the second thing I want to touch on is different types of work calls for your attention differently. And you might have the heart space and brain space for some more than others in the aftermath of your breakup. And I encourage you to use this to your advantage. So for example, when I teach a class at my work, I'm 100% focused on the class, even if it's a 4-hour class straight with no breaks. And that's awesome. And I was able to do that still in my breakup. And that's something I learned about myself. So I would rather take on work like that than focus on project management or creative work, because I know when I'm doing project management work, my mind kind of would wander back to my breakup. And if I'm doing creative work, I'm just not as creative. So that is how I know what types of work I have the heart space and brain space for. And I also know for myself, coaching work really is in that same bucket too, one-on-one coaching sessions. So when I have one-on-one coaching sessions with people, even during my breakup, I focus on that 100%. And so if I stacked, let's say 5-6 sessions on top of each other and did those back to back, I would be able to do that. And I really welcomed it because I remember thinking, wow, this is such a good workload for myself in this time. And I could just focus on other people and kind of brush past my sadness in the meantime. And that would just be how I would spend time living. You have something like that too. I don't know what it is for you, but I hope in some experimentation, and if there's some silver lining that comes out from when you go through a heartbreak and you are still at your work and you still have your job, to figure out what it is that you would rather do than other types of work. And in the capacity where it can be allowed for accommodation, you could perhaps ask other folks on your team to swap the work with you. When I teach a 4-hour class in a breakup, I am zapped. After the class, I could do it, but I could tell the reason why I could tell that the breakup is still on my mind is because I'm absolutely so zapped. Energy is gone after those classes. So it doesn't mean that does not have an impact on you, but it's still my preferred type of work to do. By the way, I know now that if I have 4 pages of paper, it is probably going to be a 20-minute episode. But now I'm filling in a lot, so I think this is going to be a little bit longer. And so now I'm going to go through a couple of general tips I have for healing from heartbreak. And specifically, because this is a work-focused podcast, knowing that you're healing from heartbreak while you have work, I have some general things intermixed here. So something I would tell myself looking back a few months ago is to set some very low expectations with myself with my healing journey and being gentle with myself. So if you're in a similar spot and this episode attracted you because you saw that I was going to talk about this topic, I would say that you just have to do your best to move on, but know that you will not be as productive as you were when you were in love. And bouncing back will take time. And perhaps it will take months. And perhaps it would even take you years in the worst case scenario, but it will get better. I promise. All breakups do get better. Your work self is your whole self. How your life is will impact how you are at work, and vice versa. How you are at work will impact your personal life. I think I knew this intuitively years ago, before I even kept a work journal, but now I really feel it. There was no way I was able to show up to work and be a whole other work self when my dating life was a mess. This is how I see the intersection of work and dating play out in my life. And so this is also why I think if you can, I would think about treating dating kind of like a time-bound thing, like a thing you spend your time doing, right? So depending on what season of life you're going through, I would actively think about that against the backdrop of my other life seasons. So for example, the way that would look is I would not recruit for a new job if I'm trying to date, because I know that dating for me takes so much time that those two things would conflict with each other. And this actually was very true for me last year when I was dating my ex-boyfriend, was when I got my job, because I had my dating sort of covered and had the time and energy then to spend on getting a new job. And he was very lovely and supporting me for that. And I did need that. And so I would think for yourself, what season of life are you in? What time and what kind of work can you manage? And therefore then how could you incorporate dating or not dating, or perhaps breaking up with your boyfriend? If you could pick a time, when do you want to do that? Pick a company where you have rapport with your coworkers. So this is, again, more of a strategic thing. Of course, everybody wants to pick a company they really want to work at and really enjoy working at. And I don't think I would even necessarily rank this part higher than, for example, the salary of the role and the work details of the role and the flexibility. Other things I prioritize more than the rapport I can get from my coworkers at this company. But having gone through so many different types of breakups over the course of my career and having worked at all these different types of workplaces, I have really, really heartfelt experiences and reflections about that. And this is why I love having work friends, and wherever I go, I really have prioritized making friends with the people I work with, and not just go in, do work, chit chat, be personable, and just leave. Because time and time again, when I have made those connections and I have that rapport with my coworkers, is when I feel supported in the workplace when I was going through a rough patch. And I also just really love doing that. I think that's generally pretty good, solid advice that I would give for anybody, because you're already spending time at work anyways, right? Like, I know it's really trendy and popular to make fun of corporate America and say, oh my God, like, this is a company good, or rather this company is a family, like blah, blah, blah. Like, yes, it's right. Like, I would not go as far to say that my companies have ever been my family. I really would not. But have the people who made up the company supported me while I was going through all different types of rough times? 200% yes. And I am so grateful for that. And this is yet another comment on how your work is your life, and it is a part of your life, and the people that you choose to interact with at work, if you can have and build a solid relationship with them, it would just only fulfill you even more when you are thinking about your life holistically. So that's what I would say. I encourage everybody to make work friends, genuine work friends. And actually, a comment about this: singleness connects people together, but you have to be careful, right? Like my opening monologue, singleness can be a slippery slope when everybody is just kind of in a state of mind where you can commiserate and complain and rant about being single and how horrible it is. But yeah, I definitely have seen colleagues or peers, not really enjoy their work friends because they're in different stages of life. So if all your work friends are married and have children and they're kind of off doing parenting and that kind of thing, and you are single, I would seek out other single people at your company and making connections that way. Because the fact of the matter is, it is just very hard for you to connect with your colleagues who are parents if you're not a parent, right? It just like, I don't know if I need to explain this anymore. Is anyone gonna cancel me for saying that? I mean, that's just how it is, right? Like, I love my friends with families and children, but many of them have not also been single and dating for a very long time. And they're wonderful, and they can have always been supporting me, and I just still love them. But the way they empathize with you is just going to be a little bit different from another single person. So find single friends. If you're a single person, find single friends at work to make work friends with. So don't neglect your married, coupled, and parenting work friends, but you will find a community, I think, in a single work friend that you can't find in a parenting work friend. Okay, that was very wordy. I think I could have probably said that a little bit better. Another tip I have for recovering from heartbreak faster is to go co-work with friends, or go to a co-working space, or just something that changes up your scenery, literally, and your day-to-day sort of environment. So you're not thinking about your ex, and you don't have the physical reminders of your ex when you are going through this period of time. So for my own self, I rearranged the furniture in this house. This is the same house I was in when I was dating my ex, but I completely rearranged it. I even got rid of some pieces of furniture and have actually a new piece of furniture. That was not intentional. I think that's a different story about decorating and interior design, but I cannot stress how much it did actually change and help me. The thing what that does for you that helps is that it kind of tricks your brain into thinking more time has passed in a very odd way, because now you are, those like in the movies when they when they're showing the evolution of mankind or something like that, right? Like thousands of years have passed, and they do it in that like speed, like 20x speed way, and you see all the trees pop up and all the landscape change and all the dinosaurs dying and all the stuff. That is the same thing I think my brain thinks when I have changed my furniture. It's like, ooh, oh my gosh, the landscape has changed. Time must have really passed. And I think this is just me trying to psychoanalyze myself. I think that is what does the trick for you when you rearrange furniture in your house after the breakup. So highly encourage it. If you can afford to change up some pieces, I would do it. If not, then just rearrange the locations of the furniture so it doesn't look exactly like the way you and your ex spend time in your house. General working on yourself and getting to know yourself really well in relationships. This is the best and proactive thing you can do to help yourself when you're healing. So putting healing on full blast. That is just general healing advice I would give, and then I would just end the episode with that. So this is not strictly work related, but it always really helps me. And you're going to grow back stronger, and it's just going to prep you for your next breakup so much better. So here are the 4 things that I have done in my own life where I would categorize as putting my healing on full blast. So the first one is going to a cord cutting ceremony. This is amazing. I cannot stop raving about my cord cutting ceremonies. So I have done cord cutting ceremonies by myself in my house in like a DIY fashion, right? Like, so it's not super hard for you to Google cord cutting ceremony process. And there are, blogs and articles online of how to do that and so on and so forth. But much like going to a massage, I think going to get your cord cutting ceremony done, hosted by, in my case, a Reiki healer, was just so amazing. So I got mine done in Hawaii. My Reiki healer and the woman who did my cord cutting ceremonies, her name is Sherry Tachibana. her company is called Manawa Energy. I'll put her details somewhere so that folks can just click on it. She's awesome. I've not had Reiki up until I experienced her cord cutting ceremonies. And so, maybe I could have a whole another episode on talking about energy healing and what Reiki is and isn't and whatnot. But what the cord cutting ceremonies did for me was it's so hard to articulate. And I don't have it written because I've been sitting on the script for actually literally a month, and I just really want to publish this episode. So I knew that when I got to this part, I could just think about it and talk about it. It's really quite ineffable. I'm just going to cheapen with my words and just grab the adjective that literally means cannot be described and say that my cord cutting ceremonies were ineffable. But it really was. It did really something for me that was so final in my heart and my head, and I really needed that. And so I encourage everybody to try a cord cutting ceremony led by a professional. Okay, that's what I'm going to say about that. Therapy, good old therapy. I love therapy. And actually, you know what? I really recommend getting different types of therapists and having different therapists in different seasons of your life and correlated then different breakups you have, because, different therapists are trained in different modalities. 2 exes ago, I had just such a traumatizing and devastating breakup that my therapist that really helped me then, and just so happened that I hired her then, I didn't know how powerful her modality was going to be for me, was EMDR. And EMDR changed my life, and I really needed that in that breakup. In general, a therapist is really helpful for you if you just want to talk yourself out. And they are professionally trained and equipped to help you, and they really could help you with the different modalities that they have. So in my case, EMDR, for example, I'll tell you the long story short. 2 exes ago, it was really devastating and traumatizing. I remember in the EMDR session, when you start the session, you would say, how painful does this memory feel to you, or this thing you're recalling? And I remember saying, it's a 10 out of 10 painful. I could not sleep, right? I was crying so much. And then at the end of the session, she said to me, how painful now do you feel thinking about this, thinking about him, blah, blah. And I remember saying 1 out of 10. It's nuts. I can't describe it. But there is science behind therapist questions for you while your eye movements are tracking a certain way and tapping into a part of your brain that you can't access by yourself. That is just the science of that. And so I would highly recommend everybody to get a therapist, not only just normally really, but especially in the aftermath of a breakup. Number 3, diving into shadow work. Okay, so I'm recording this. It is August of 2023. Shadow work has been what has been on my mind for the last couple months. I've been thoroughly interested in it and have spent a lot of time reading, studying, and even actually taking a class on it. Essentially, anything that is in your subconscious is really your shadow. You don't know it. And yet our subconscious drives us to make decisions so frequently, right? Sometimes, even if I say that something is a gut feeling for you, what is that gut, right? A lot of it is your subconscious. So the more we can get to understand what each of our subconscious is trying to tell us, the more you can use it in your dating. And so for myself, my shadow, well, I've been exploring, why is it that dating has been so hard for me? And that has been really interesting. And I've learned so much about myself, and I just feel like I've grown so much in ways that I hadn't in therapy through shadow work and getting into shadow work and reading about shadow work and doing exercises, trying to follow along from different books, trying to get to understand my own shadow and subconscious. That is something I also recommend for everybody's on the menu for putting your healing on full blast is diving into shadow work. And as an extension of that, I am thinking about hiring a Jungian analyst. That is somebody who is fully versed in Carl Jung's shadow work. He's kind of like the godfather of this all. That they could, I'd imagine that if I hired somebody like that, they would speed up my own discovery of my shadow much faster. So it's something I am doing. Is TBD on that. I haven't gone very far, but if I do, we could do an episode on this. And the last thing, this is something very personal to me, very personal to myself. I went on a yoga teacher training journey. So I took the Core Power Yoga Teacher Training Program as part of my healing. And I did that because honestly, I don't really have a logical reason why I signed up to take this class. I don't really think I am going to teach yoga at this point in my life, but I would like the option to have done it. But I just felt called to, I guess. I just felt like I should do it. And I did. And it was amazing. And I won't tell you all the stories, but the training really connected me with some of the people that have been really magical in my healing, actually. And so I'm grateful to having done that. And I also went surfing a lot this summer. And I went to Costa Rica on a surf trip recently, and I came back from that. And that has also been very transformational for me, because I actually in those two things, I think, in the surf trips, rather, the surfing trips, I really learned to love my single life, which I hadn't been able to say actually for the longest time, because I was so focused on dating and finding that partner, to travel with. In fact, I have not traveled by myself for myself since I was 17, before I went to a freshman year of college. That summer, I went to New Zealand. I had a great time. I hung out with my uncle and my uncle's family. And yeah, that was the trip that actually gave me the impression, like, I don't really want to travel by myself anymore. I'd rather do it with a boyfriend. All these other people and couples and whatever I meet on in my New Zealand trip were coupled, and I want to be like that too. But this summer, because of all the solo trips that I took, I really got the sense that actually my life is pretty freaking awesome. And I also started this podcast in the midst of all of that. And so that is something I'm very grateful to, because in a kind of very indirect, weird way, I got some creative energy back, and something just shifted in me. I'm not sure how to describe it. But here I am recording an episode on dating and whatnot. And so you know that this works. So that is the end. This is all I have right now, 4 pages worth of content about dating and work. I am so curious who listens to this episode. What do you all think? And yeah, we will see you in another episode where we talk about work reflections, and the daily work journal.